We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
Alrighty, everybody. Look, I like that we got some bump music here, which kind of eases the transition from the show opener now over to the show introduction. Bump music. A little bit of inside lingo for you there. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a brand spanking new edition of Granite State Live. It is great to have you along on this Tuesday evening, the 4th day of March, 2025. I'm your host, Keith Hansen, the unapologetic contrarian conservative, never apologizing for my toxic white masculinity. I can't help it. I was born this way, and my doctors say it's a pre-existing condition, so they won't pay for it. Never apologizing for my Christian faith, heavily armed as always. And normally at this point, this is where we would introduce tonight's co-host. All right, so a little bit of inside info on this one. So Therese is still out. And I will say, whatever she has, it took me about 3 weeks to get over it. So I really feel for Therese and what she's going through right now. So hopefully she will be back next week. So I'm going to be running the first hour of Granite State Live solo. And then Julian Acciard is going to be joining us. So we're going to get right into what we're going to be covering tonight. Many of you have heard about the comments. Some people say, well, it was a little insensitive, maybe it was a little colorblind, maybe it was, that's not the right phrase, what do I want? That it was tone deaf. That's the wording, tone deaf. From Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so, yep, we all know that, I was going to say Boston Wu. Well, we can call her that, right? Boston Wu, that's her new nickname. Boston Wu is a progressive. Boston Wu is, do you want to call her a communist? You can call her a communist. I think she's probably earned that title. But that being said, there are a number of people who have been absolutely apoplectic about some comments that she made about a shooting that occurred this past weekend. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that during the, and why we don't want to mass up New Hampshire's. The one thing I do have to say that was good that came out of Kelly Ayotte's gubernatorial campaign was the slogan, "Don't mass up New Hampshire." I'm all for that. Let's not do that. Let's not turn the cities and anywhere, any political subdivision here in New Hampshire, turn that into something like Boston. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about Second Amendment issues, since it ties in with the first story. We're going to be joined by former New Hampshire Republican State Representative JR Hoell. I know he's a board member for New Hampshire Firearms Coalition. So we're going to talk about some pending legislation, specifically preemption laws, which are very, very interesting. If you're not familiar with preemption, stick around because you're going to want to hear this. It basically takes away the ability for cities and counties and towns and municipalities to enact their own gun laws. It puts the entirety of legislating firearms where I think it should be, which is in the seat of the state. So we're going to talk about pending legislation coming up here in 2025 with JR Hoell. Hour number 2, we're going to be welcoming Julian Acciard back to the program. And we're going to talk about a New Hampshire Journal article that came out this past weekend, I think it was Sunday, where now Scott Brown, arguably people are looking for Scott Brown to jump into the Senate race up against Jeanne Shaheen. Well, most recent polling comes out, and I'm not referencing anything on a computer screen, so I'm going off of memory, about 10 or 11 percentage points favored to Jeanne Shaheen if Scott Brown were to run. Now, if we introduce old Christopher T. Sununu, that changes to 11 to 12 points in favor of the Republican candidate. Now, I do have it from a reliable source, and I kind of put that in air fingers quotes. We have it from a reliable source that Sununu is not going to run in 2026. Now, whether or not that's fact, people always speculate. No, I'm not going to run. No, I'm not going to run. No, I'm not going to run. And then they wind up jumping into the race. So we will talk about that with Jeff Chidester. You may recognize that name. He is the morning show host over there at WFEA. So we're going to welcome him onto the program, and Julian Acciard will be here during hour number 2. All right, we're going to get right into what I think is a pretty important topic here, and that is a shooting that occurred in Boston, specifically at Chick-fil-A. I believe it was Copley Plaza where this shooting took place. So to set this up here, and I just want to make sure that we have all the information correct, Boston police have identified the individual who was shot and killed. Now, he was the perpetrator as Lamarck Jaramillo. 32 years of age with a last known address in the city's Roslindale section. So this guy goes on what I think he wanted to have as a knife rampage. Armed with a knife, chases 2 individuals into a Chick-fil-A. Inside the Chick-fil-A, there is an off-duty police officer. So the off-duty police officer challenges this guy. This guy, pro tip, when a police officer draws a gun and challenges you to drop whatever weapon you have in your hand, it's generally a good idea to comply. That's the quickest way to take the room temperature challenge, but I digress. So Jaramillo decides he's not going to heed the warning that the police officer is giving him. And the police officer does exactly what the police officer was trained to do, which was to drop the perp like third period French. And he did that. Well, some interesting comments coming out from Boston Police Commissioner Cox and also Boston Mayor Wu. What I want to do is to just pull up Boston, I think this is a Fox News affiliate, Channel 25 out of Boston. I think we have not the Fox 25 clip, but we have the NBC 10 clip that's queued up. So we're going to play cut 1 of this now.
In that breaking news we've been following all evening, an off-duty police officer shot and killed an armed man at a Chick-fil-A. This was in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood earlier. The shooting sparking an active scene on Boylston Street with several police cruisers responding. You can see all of them right there. At this hour, we're learning new details about the moments before the deadly shooting. Good evening, I'm Darren Botello. Tonight, authorities updating the public on their investigation. Our Malcolm Johnson joins us live right now from Boylston with the latest. And Malcolm, what can you tell us at this point?
Darren, Suffolk County District Attorney Joseph Hayden described this as a chaotic scene, and this is why. Imagine being inside of this Boylston Street Chick-fil-A earlier today, closer to 5 o'clock, and you see 2 people run inside, and behind them, a man with a knife trying to stab them. That's according to Boston police. Well, that's what a number of people inside the restaurant saw, including an off-duty officer who pulled out his gun.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. That's all I can say, really.
Disbelief on Boylston Street after an officer-involved shooting inside Chick-fil-A Saturday night left 1 man dead.
More details. There was an officer involved.
I've lived here 30 years, and I don't know anything like that happening before.
Boston police investigating inside the restaurant after they say an off-duty officer was inside when 2 young people ran in, being chased by a man with a knife, allegedly trying to stab them. The officer reportedly identified himself as police and told the suspect to drop the weapon.
The individual did not comply. The officer discharged his weapon to stop the threat, and the individual was struck.
The suspect died from the shooting.
This is a pretty tragic incident. We don't look for loss of life, so our condolences go to the individual who was killed tonight.
Locals commending Boston police.
I think the Boston police are extremely well trained and disciplined with how to deal with distraught individuals and situations that could escalate.
Police
My condolences and all of our thoughts are with the family of the individual whose life has been lost.
Thoughts and prayers. It's the obligatory response to offer up when there really isn't anything else to say. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims. Our thoughts and prayers are with, our thoughts and prayers are with. Okay. That being said, you're offering the condolences to an individual who made a conscious decision to engage in aggressive, deadly behavior with a deadly weapon. Why are you offering condolences to an individual who, and I can't say this for certain because I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I wouldn't be doing talk media. It is reasonable to assume that this individual, given the opportunity, would have utilized that knife. And I don't know how big the knife was, but I can tell you, as a subject matter expert and recognized court expert witness in the use of force, and also in active shooter response and mass casualty training for law enforcement, both on a local, state, and federal level, I've seen studies, I have participated in clinical studies, and we have looked at the science. I know liberals love to talk about the science, so we can talk about the science, about a knife wound. Knives are incredibly deadly. In fact, you're more likely to die from a knife wound being stabbed than you are from being shot. But I digress. You can bleed out from a knife wound to your neck in under 30 seconds. Unconscious in 30 seconds. Well on your way to hypovolemic and hemorrhagic shock. Okay? Free Google if you want to look what those terms mean. The reason why I'm being snarky and sarcastic about this is because this is the type of mentality, the mental crisis of the progressive left that is so unbelievably infuriating. This individual chose a course of action for whatever reason. Now, some people say, well, maybe he's mentally ill. Okay. Maybe this is a person who's on drugs. Okay. Well, pro tip, don't use drugs. And then maybe you won't go into, drug-crazed, homicidal mania in the middle of a heavily populated area. This individual made a choice to arm himself. This individual made a choice to go after people who, by the way, courtesy of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the majority of these people are unarmed. Courtesy of the ridiculous gun laws that exist as a result of people like Maura Healey and other people who believe that private citizens don't have the right to keep and bear arms for the purposes of personal protection. For stopping people exactly like Lamarck Jaramillo, who again made a conscious decision to arm himself with a knife, go into a heavily populated area, the majority of whom are unarmed, and engage in aggressive, deadly behavior. And I'm quite convinced that if the off-duty police officer had not been present at that scene, there would have been a body count. It just wouldn't have been the attacker. It would have been innocent people who were in that Chick-fil-A to get, ostensibly, food. And they have to deal with this. But to have the mayor come out and to have the police commissioner for the city of Boston offering condolences. Listen, everybody knows police are not looking to shoot and kill people. No police officer starts his or her shift, or federal agent or sheriff's deputy or constable or state trooper, starts their shift with the intention of killing somebody. And by the way, law enforcement does not use deadly force for the purposes of killing. Deadly force is used to stop or incapacitate a threat. Nobody in their right mind would use a firearm with the intention of killing a person. That, by the way, is the mens rea, the guilty mind or the intent necessary to prove a first-degree murder case. There's intent. There is no intent to deprive a person of their life, at least not by the police, at least not the way that police officers are trained. Now, could you say the same for Lamarck Jaramillo? Was he just trying to stop somebody at the Chick-fil-A? I don't know. Maybe he thought he was on a mission from God or Buddha or Allah or whoever he happens to worship. Maybe he was trying to stop people from getting those delicious waffle fries. I don't think so. I think he was there to kill people. With malice aforethought and with malice in his heart, he had the knife to do that. And so police officers did exactly what they were supposed to do. The off-duty police officer, who thank God he was armed in an off-duty capacity, drew his firearm and issued commands. Drop the knife, drop the weapon, get back. This idiot decides, no, I'm not going to listen to those directives. I'm going to continue on my own path. Well, that path led straight to the morgue. And I got to be honest with you. I love dead criminals because dead criminals don't reoffend. Two places that criminals belong: in jail, prison, and in the graveyard. This guy's not going to reoffend again. Same thing with George Floyd. George Floyd has not reoffended. It's a beautiful thing. Now, some people say, that's insensitive, Keith. How could you possibly say that? Because I despise people who take advantage, who prey upon people that they perceive to be weaker than they are. Now, what does this have to do with Granite State Live? Well, here in New Hampshire, we are a constitutional carry state. You do know that you can get your concealed weapons license. You go down to your local police department. I think it's $10. You get your license in probably 2 or 3 days. In some instances, I've seen some people walk out same day with their concealed weapons license. Beautiful thing. You do not need that here in the Granite State. You can open carry a firearm, conceal carry a firearm, as long as you are not a prohibited person, as long as you're not a habitual drug user, as long as you're not a convicted felon, as long as you are not subject to a marital or domestic restraining order, as long as you are not prohibited under the Lautenberg Act, as long as you have not renounced your citizenship, as long as you have not, been discharged dishonorably from the United States military, you can buy a firearm. You can carry that firearm. But that is not, and I don't want to use the word privilege because it's a Second Amendment right. The rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But Massachusetts finds it very appropriate to put their citizens, their residents, through a licensing scheme where you have to take a class. Now, I'm all in favor of firearms classes. But if you've taken a Massachusetts LTC or license to carry class, you know what kind of absolute BS that LTC class is. First of all, the people that teach it are not qualified to be teaching mass general law. Number two, half of them couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. But they're more than happy to take your $150 to put you through a BS class that now allows you to genuflect before the altar of progressivism, the Firearms Record Bureau in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and say, Mother, may I? Mother, may I have this piece of paper that allows me to carry a device to protect myself? To protect myself from the very people that you have failed to protect society from. Have you noticed in New Hampshire how we're talking about bail reform? That's become a hot button topic. The idea of preventative detention is to keep offenders locked up pre-trial so they don't go out and reoffend. See, here's the thing. If you want people to stop committing crimes, you have to make it uncomfortable for them to continue in their ways. This is how we disincentivize unwanted behavior. We lock these people up. We throw them in prison. We restrict their ability to go out and do harm. I don't like jail. It's uncomfortable. Good. Don't commit crimes, and you won't wind up there. See, but Massachusetts doesn't believe that criminals should be punished. No, in fact, criminals should be apologized to. And if you happen to get smoked in the process of committing your crime, well, then we'll extend the courtesy of the apology and the condolences to the people that you've left behind. I don't think any condolences should be extended here. In fact, what I think should happen is that the off-duty police officer should submit a bill for the ammunition that he wasted on this scumbag. That's the way you handle criminal justice. But you don't do that in Michelle Wu's Boston. We're going to talk about more gun laws and some of the preemption bills that are coming up both nationally and on the New Hampshire level with New Hampshire Firearms Coalition board member and former New Hampshire Republican State Representative JR Hoell when Granite State Live continues, plus your phone calls and much, much more. Don't go away.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
I'm Christine Ohm, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught. You will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
If you love them enough to drive an hour to cheer them on as they get beat 11-0 in the rain, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the-right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Throw that ball, Diane! Woo! You got this!
Alrighty, welcome back. Granite State Live this Tuesday night, the 4th day of March, 2025. All right, well, we're gonna pick up where we left off, I should say, opening up with a little bit of fire there. Don't forget, too, you can always catch archives of the program as well as the live stream when we broadcast from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. on Tuesday evenings. Sometimes we may go a little bit long like we did last week. Got really, really good feedback on the program that we did last week. So appreciate all of the comments and everybody stopping by and just sharing their thoughts as well, too. Because, again, we do this for you as residents and citizens here of New Hampshire. You can always catch the program live and archived at GraniteRock.com on the Granite Rock X channel in the Facebook feed. And then you can also check out, if you search for Right America Media, and you look under Facebook, Getter, Clout Hub, X. Just look at a Right America Media. You can catch the show there. And then also at ramtv.live. That's ramtv.live. And again, live stream as well as the archives. So go ahead and check those out. All right. Well, since I moved to New Hampshire in 2015, one of the things that I have to say I've really, really enjoyed about being here is, and if I use the word progressive, I don't mean it in the terms of the communist, satanic, progressive Democrats. I mean the forward-thinking, hey, let's really, really start to make some progress in a positive way when it comes to Second Amendment issues and gun rights. Shortly after I moved to New Hampshire, I was doing radio WNTK WUVR and had the privilege of emceeing the Women's Defense League rally down on the steps of the State House, and that was right after constitutional carry had been signed in. It was fantastic. You don't need your concealed weapons licenses anymore. If you're a lawful citizen, you can carry a firearm the same way you could carry a pen, a pocket knife, or a cell phone, and there's no issue. Now, of course, ever since, the Democrats have been targeting, and they have been targeting hard, those constitutionally protected rights. So when I see a bill like HB 609, I get warm fuzzies. I love it. Because what it does is it takes away, this, by the way, House Bill 609 is the New Hampshire preemption law. Now, preemption is something that is very, very important because let's assume for a moment that gun laws do not rest solely with the state. You have 10 counties here in New Hampshire. So if you're driving through a county, from one county to another, in theory, you could run afoul of a county gun law or a county ordinance that in some way, shape, form, or manner restricts your ability to carry a firearm. Maybe it's a magazine capacity. Maybe it's a certain type of ammunition, a la you can't have hollow points in New Jersey, you have to use full metal jackets. Well, of course, anybody who knows, you don't carry full metal jackets in a defensive firearm, you use hollow points. But that's what happens when people who don't know what a gun looks like try to regulate guns. The preemption bill, House Bill 609, is an act relative to the general court's authority over the purchase, sale, ownership, use, possession, transport, licensing, permitting, taxation, and other matters pertaining to firearms, stun guns, tasers, pepper spray devices, knives, and other self-defense tools. Basically, what it does is it says, cities, counties, towns, municipalities, political subdivisions, guess what? You don't get to pass your own gun laws or your own gun ordinances. Those are reserved to the state. So to talk more about this is New Hampshire Firearms Coalition board member and former New Hampshire Republican State Representative JR Hoell. JR, great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for jumping on today. Okay, production, I can't hear JR.
Now can you hear me? Let's start this again.
All right, perfect. Oh, there we go. You are loud and clear, my friend. Welcome.
So let's just, before we start HB 609, let's jump back to the mayor from Boston. She has not apologized to the 7 New Hampshire citizens who are facing felony level arrest for merely carrying a firearm across the border and having been stopped while it was in their car. That case is still pending before the Massachusetts Supreme Court. And again, right, and even the New Hampshire Attorney General weighed in on that case in an amicus brief, along with most of the national gun groups and several of the state groups, because Massachusetts laws are so onerous that they lock up our citizens for almost 2 years, right, a year and a half to 2 years, for just merely having in a bag, in the trunk of your car, a firearm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, think about that. That makes sense, though, doesn't it, JR? Because we don't want those knuckle-dragging troglodytes from the live free or die state to come down here and think that they can engage in whatever behavior that they want to. Oh, no. They are going to be subjected to the iron fist of the tyrannical government of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Meanwhile, if you're a criminal, we're watching this commercial here with Kristi Noem. Criminals aren't welcome in the United States. Oh, no. But why don't you just head on over to Boston? Why don't you head on over to Springfield? Why don't you head on over to Worcester or Fall River or Lowell or any of the other pits, the armpits that exist in Massachusetts? Because you're welcome there. You won't be held accountable for your actions. We'll lock up your victims for trying to defend themselves against your felonious assaults. But I digress.
Well, and I'm sure the members know that are listening tonight, there is no duty for the state to protect individuals. Right?
Indeed.
There is no duty for that off-duty cop to do anything in that restaurant. He did it because it was the right thing to do, but there is no duty on duty or off duty for the state to protect individuals. That's left up to the citizens.
It's amazing how many people think that because, and Los Angeles Police Department was the very first agency to have this on their cruisers. It was actually as a result of a public relations campaign in the 1950s. People were going to California. They wanted to see the black and white LAPD cruisers because all the television shows and the movies were being filmed in LA. So people were going up to Los Angeles police officers asking for photographs. I mean, they were treating these people like they were, the officers, like they were movie stars. So they introduced a public relations campaign. And it was actually a police recruit who came up with the slogan, "To protect and serve." That slogan, as cutesy as it is, and it's a great public relations campaign, but the problem is that is very misleading to the average person, because I ask this question very often. Does a law enforcement officer have a legal obligation to protect you? And of course they say, oh, yes, they do. Well, no. Castle Rock versus Gonzalez would certainly disagree with that. It's a Supreme Court ruling that says law enforcement has no duty to protect any one individual from harm befalling them from another private actor. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it is. You want protection, hire private security, or do it yourself. Law enforcement does not have a legal obligation to do that.
Correct. So back to House Bill 609, right? The purpose of this legislation is there are currently loopholes. Towns have been exploiting some of these loopholes to put in place different zoning regulations, different ways to stop people from owning firearms or using them. And let's say there's a publicly owned piece of land. Well, you can't discharge your firearm there. You can't sight in your rifle. You can't go hunting there. And this ever encroachment happens year after year after year. So I know you were a resident of Florida for a while. They put in an enhanced preemption law that created penalties so that if a town was misbehaving, you could take the town to court over it. And if you won, there was real financial penalties paid by the bad actors. This bill doesn't quite do it that same way, but it does put into place the bad actor, right? If there are bad actors who are abusing the law, we can go after them on the 91A violation style penalties, which means you can sue the town and recoup legal fees.
I'm glad you brought up the Florida law. 790-33 is Florida's preemption law. And you know, I really wish, to be honest with you, I really wish the New Hampshire State Legislature just took this, changed it from Florida to New Hampshire, and put this forth, because not only are there severe financial penalties, but I want to read directly from this. This is the prohibitions and the penalties section. This is 790-33, paragraph 3. A knowing and willful violation of any provision of this section by a person acting in an official capacity for any entity, that would be a city, county, town, municipality, or political subdivision, enacting or causing to be enforced a local ordinance or administrative rule or regulation prohibited under paragraph A, or otherwise under color of law, shall be cause for termination of employment or contract or removal from office by the governor. Wow. Talk about teeth, JR. Why don't we have language like that in HB 609?
I don't know. Well, I mean, we started with something similar under former Representative Norm Silber several years ago, and it got nowhere. This is the first step down that path to correct the loopholes and to put in at least some level of penalties, in that if you sue the town for compliance and you win, you can recoup the legal costs necessary to sue the town.
I mean, as it should be. If you are the prevailing party in a civil suit, you should be entitled to having your court costs, attorney's fees, and associated costs.
Unfortunately, the way government has structured itself, it provides immunity for itself for bad actions.
Isn't that convenient?
Yes.
You know, I was talking with somebody about this the other day, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I would love to see, because remember when Kamala Harris came to New Hampshire and she held up a pen. And she said, she said, what's more mighty, the pen or the sword? And somebody said, oh, the sword. And she said, no. As a prosecutor, I can do more damage with this than I can with any other tool. And she went on to clarify what her intentions were there. With the pen, she has the ability to tie somebody up in years and years and years and millions of dollars worth of litigation, either civil or criminal. And that's an abomination. So I just want to float this idea out there. Maybe a state rep or a state senator will hear this and actually decide to do this. How about this? How about when the state or a county attorney brings charges against an individual, if that individual is not convicted, if they are acquitted, then their legal expenses are paid by whatever political subdivision or political entity brought the charges to begin with. I think that would reduce significantly the number of BS criminal cases of people who are just saying, whatever, it's like spaghetti, just throw it against the wall and see what sticks, which is exactly what Massachusetts does, by the way, with the gun laws. If it involves a firearm, throw it to the district attorney is going to say, throw it to the jury and let them see what happens. I think, because here's the thing, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in years trying to keep your happy ass out of jail. And if you win, you're still bankrupt. You lost your house, you lost your pension, you've gone to every single Tom, Dick, and Harry looking for money. You're never going to get that $300,000 or $400,000 back. In essence, what you're doing is buying your freedom. I would love to see that. If the county attorney, if the state attorney, if they fail to make their case resulting in a conviction and you are acquitted, they are responsible for paying your legal fees. Your thoughts?
I love the idea. Unfortunately, the system, and you know full well, right, through what happened with our family, is very biased against the family. And you can spend an enormous amount of money defending yourself or your family in court.
I wanted to ask you, as it relates to the preemption, are there specific instances that you could offer up of either county or city or town ordinances that would, in essence, be done away with if HB 609 were signed into law?
I can't do that right now. Was not prepared for that. But I did see at one point the voters in the town of Epsom were trying to push through a new ordinance relative to discharge of firearms in the town. There was something down in Hollis several years ago. What we don't want is you to drive from Milford to Amherst and suddenly find out that, oh, you need to store this in your car, or you need to change your magazine because it's now requires a different size. That's just not going to happen in New Hampshire.
If it's an administrative action, or if it's an ordinance, those are not laws. So that wouldn't necessarily result in an arrest and a conviction in a criminal court. To the best of my understanding, administrative actions are punishable by punishments no more severe than fines or forfeiture or revocation. So in theory,
typically what they're doing is they're prohibiting carry in the town offices. For instance, they're going to say any of the buildings that are under town domain or part of town domain, right, are off limits for firearms. And that is not the case. And it shouldn't be the case for the employees either.
Mm-hmm. No, because, I mean, they should obviously have the right to keep and bear arms for their own personal protection.
They don't lose their constitutional rights just because they choose to be employed by the town, the municipality, or the state. We are aware that the Department of Transportation has made it a constraint relative to carrying firearms if you're doing plowing, like the snow plows in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. The plow drivers are required not to be able to carry a firearm. We know in the case of the Officer Haas being shot at the state hospital,
indeed,
he was disarmed by a state policy and a contract with Dartmouth Healthcare.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to have a comment, because I know you and I have had some pretty interesting and I'll go out and say fiery conversations about the regulation of occupational firearms. Somebody in a security capacity, somebody in an investigative capacity. But we're not talking about armed professionals here. We're talking about private citizens and their right to be able to do that. That's a very, very popular thing. You see people, we don't want you carrying in town offices, or we don't want you carrying at polls, or we don't want you carrying anything else like that. So I think that this is actually a really, really good bill. What I'd love to see is more teeth. I would love to see the penalties expanded out to involve specifically enumerated monetary fines if you do have a person operating in that official capacity, representing a city, a county, a town, a municipality, who chooses to enact or promulgate one of these ordinances or regulations that restrict somebody's firearms rights. I think it has to be ironclad, and we have to send a message that this type of behavior will not be tolerated in a free society.
Right. Well, and that's the reason this bill has been filed again. It's a watered down version of what was filed by Norm Silber, or Representative Silber, several years ago. Same idea, which is to start closing some of the loopholes and to establish some level of penalties. This one should be far more acceptable to the legislature than the last one.
All right.
We're going to eat an elephant one bite at a time.
No, that's true. And you know what? Every step along the way is a good step. But what we have to do is to make sure that these things are ironclad. And then if, God forbid, that we wind up having a regime change, which I've been very, very vocal about this. If the Republican Party doesn't get its ass in gear, we're going to get shellacked here during the midterms. So, watch out, because while you're resting on your laurels and spiking the football, which, by the way, I still haven't seen an email or heard anything from the new GOP chairman. I'm not surprised, but anyway. We're going to talk about national preemption and how that would relate to New Hampshire residents in New Hampshire carrying their firearms. When Granite State Lives continues, much more with JR Hoell, plus your phone calls. The phone lines, they are working tonight. Awesome. 833-603-TALK. That's 833-603-8255. Much more coming up right after this. Don't go away.
kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. We're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it, and we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
I'm Christine Ohm, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught. You will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
Jason, let's go see your room.
That's not right. How is it? Is it good?
All right, so I got to be honest with you. The bump music here, it was like Christmas came early. Plus, I'm a Christmas baby, too. Actually, December 25th. So that usually comes with 2 questions. Did it suck? And did you get gypped? So now I just jump the gun and I say, somebody says, what's your date of birth? December 25th. All right, I'll be honest. So 1973. So December 25th, 1973. No, it didn't suck. No, I didn't get gypped. And sometimes they're like, what? Well, because that's inevitably the question that's going to wind up getting asked. So, but it was like Christmas and my birthday when I came in today, and the production team said, "Hey, you know what we've got for you? We've got bump music," which I've been asking for a while. So I just want to thank them for working diligently on getting that up. All right, we're going to jump back over to the Zoom line. We've got former New Hampshire State Representative JR Hoell, also member of the Board of Directors for New Hampshire Firearms Coalition, talking about right now, and this initially we were talking about House Bill 609, which is the preemption bill. However, I do believe that there is a preemption bill that is in place right now. It's working its way through the legislature on the national level. And so what this would do, if I'm understanding this, JR, and correct me if I'm wrong, what this would do would be to, in essence, prevent a state like Massachusetts or New Jersey or Connecticut or Maryland or any of these other heavily, heavily regulated 2A states from locking people up who are otherwise qualified to carry a firearm simply because they have not gone through the payment of a fee and the genuflecting in the mother may I process of trying to obtain a specific state concealed weapons license or license to carry a firearm.
Well, a lot of these states say they are shall issue, but shall issue is 1 out of every 1,000 applicants or whatever. They issue some, but they don't issue to every applicant that actually puts in a piece of paper. So the reality is, law-abiding citizens cannot carry down in Manhattan. They cannot carry in parts of Mass without a slip of paper, a permission slip from the government. So this bill put in by former New Hampshire resident while he was up here right after grad school and current Kentucky District 4 member, Representative Thomas Massey, says we're not going to allow states to start penalizing citizens either criminally or civilly relative to the mere possession of a firearm, which is a huge step in the right direction. Shall not be infringed is actually this prevents states from doing what they've been doing for years.
One of the things that I love asking the question. So, if I were to ask a constitutional historian what a well-regulated militia was, they're going to tell me that it's any able-bodied citizen between 18 and 45 years of age. If I ask a modern-day historian, college professor, what's a well-regulated militia, they're going to tell me that it's the State National Guard. And so the question that I would always ask is, well, who's right? And the answer is they both are. It just depends on when we're talking about. I believe it was 1902. The Militia Act of 1902, also known as the Dick Act, changed the legal definition of a militia from the able-bodied citizenry, which was referred to in the founding documents, and now changed the definition of that militia over to now a standing army assembled and trained by a specific state or commonwealth. But prior to the Dick Act passage in 1902, that I remember not that I remember, I'm not that old, but reading the historical documents, the Militia Act of 1792, George Washington mandated that every able-bodied citizen between 18 and 45 must possess a musket, must possess a certain number of musket balls, must possess a certain quantity of powder, and must possess a certain sized powder battery. So that would be the equivalent of the federal government coming out and saying, effective immediately pursuant to this executive action, how cool would this be? Every able-bodied citizen, I think now they would go probably up to about 60 or 65, maybe older. Every able-bodied citizen between 18 and 65 must possess an AR-15, must possess standard capacity magazines. Hey, kids, by the way, and Democrats, a standard capacity magazine for an AR? It's 30 rounds, not 10. I know, those scary black rifles. And you must possess 500 rounds of ammunition. How cool would that be? That would never happen, but it did.
In the Massachusetts Supreme Court case that I talked about at the beginning of the show, we went back and did some research relative to Massachusetts laws. And I believe the standard prohibition on powder back then, right, sometime in the mid-1800s, was 5 pounds on your person. And 5 pounds is a fair amount of powder to be on your person, considering back then, right, this was a musket, right, breech loading rifle, and you're not using that much. That's 500 shots on you person for powder.
It's amazing.
And that was just because of the fire danger.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen until the mid-1800s in Massachusetts. So prior to then, there was no restrictions.
At what point did, and I mean, I have to be honest with you. I mean, I was a law enforcement officer in Massachusetts, born and raised in Massachusetts. I got the hell out in the early 2000s, never looked back. I wouldn't move back to that state if you paid me. At what point, because I didn't really pay attention back, when I was there. And I mean, as a police officer back there, I didn't really pay attention to it either. At what point did Massachusetts lose its mind? Was it really under Maura Healey, or was it even before that? Because as long as I can remember, we had LTC restrictions or LTC requirements.
These restrictions go back quite a ways further. I would say the last 35, 40 years, they've been going the wrong direction. And unfortunately, they continue year after year after year to make it worse. And the predominant gun group down there hasn't slowed any of this down. Unfortunately, they could do a lot more to protect their rights down there. And that they haven't. They've been willing to let them go away small piece by small piece. And that's not the approach we've taken in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, we've taken the approach that we need to protect the rights of the gun owners.
Now, I'm assuming that the gun rights organization you're talking about is GOAL, the Gun Owners Action League of Mass?
Yes, correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
They were complicit in the act that was signed by Romney relative to, quote, assault weapons, unquote. As well, it's better because we get this other little piece of the pie back. Well, yeah, but you've lost this large section of your rights to do so. And trading away rights is just not a solution.
You know, with the passage of the two major Supreme Court cases, and the most recent one is the New York State Pistol and Rifle Association. I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Yes.
The Bruin decision, that a lot of states have actually they've looked at it and they've said, okay, listen, you know, our gun laws have been onerous, heavily restrictive. Maryland is a perfect example. Maryland, you had to show cause in order to get a concealed weapons license. Bruin decision comes out and they did away with that. But the only thing that I can think of that Massachusetts has done as a result of the Bruin decision is to remove the reason from issuance. But interestingly enough, they still ask.
There's one other small piece that they put into this bill that passed and Healy signed, which is if you happen to be from New Hampshire and you have a firearm in your trunk, you're okay. Right? They snuck that in as a way to start getting around this, but it doesn't address the core issues.
So no, say that again. So if you have a gun in your trunk, you're okay.
And I believe I'd have to go back and check. I think they followed the firearms protection rules relative to you have to have it unloaded.
So but the 18 U.S. Code 926C, the Safe Passage Act.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. But there is a provision in that law that was passed, and the gun owners down there were celebrating this, but it's completely insufficient. Just having it. So this is how they deal with the people that are currently awaiting a Supreme Court decision relative to mere possession in their car while they're driving on federal highways.
Where do we see that going? Does it look like it's going to be ruled in favor of the defendants, or does it look like it's going to wind up prevailing for the Commonwealth?
I don't know. The Massachusetts Supreme Court typically rules within like 100 days, and they issued a ruling saying that they weren't going to meet their typical guidelines like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they didn't tell us when they're going to issue an order. But the reality is 7-10 years ago, they had a ruling relative to tasers, I believe, and they got spanked by the U.S. Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision relative to tasers. So I'm not sure they want to go a second round with something that will likely be appealed back up to the U.S. Supreme Court if they rule against the gun owners.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Supreme Court, JR, because I think there's a lot of people who are so tired of watching these states like New York, like New Jersey, like Maryland, like Illinois and California and Massachusetts, that they're really looking for the Supreme Court to come out. And I've heard people say this. Why doesn't the Supreme Court just come out and say that all gun laws are unconstitutional and toss them all out? And we understand that, of course, you know, when it comes to a Supreme Court case, it's predicated upon a specific question. It's not a sweeping ruling. It's a question, and the question is very narrow. It's a certified question. It's very narrow in scope. So ultimately what winds up happening is that the question, narrow in scope, is answered, and so that is, in essence, how these states now bypass the ruling. They say, well, we're just going to tweak the language here. We're just going to make a small little change that ostensibly falls in keeping with what the Supreme Court ruling was, but then they're achieving their goals simply by rewording, redefining, or passing another piece of legislation. Okay, well, you know, and if you, all right, so that you have the right to carry a firearm in public. Okay, but now we're going to make, and Massachusetts tried to do this. They failed, but they tried to make every single place a gun-free zone, unless you specifically had permission from the property owner in writing. And that wasn't just, oh, you know, concealed carry is welcome here. It had to actually have your name on it. I mean, it was one of the most unbelievably restrictive and onerous pieces of legislation. Thank God that got shot down. Do you think that we're going to wind up seeing anything coming out of the Trump administration or the Supreme Court that is really going to put the kibosh on a lot of these licensing schemes?
I don't know what they're going to. There's a number of cases that are awaiting a decision whether they're going to take up, and various gun groups are following those. There was a case that had oral arguments today. It didn't really make the news. Apparently, the country of Mexico is suing us over trafficking of firearms through various dealers, and they're suing, I guess it was Smith & Wesson and several other manufacturers, and that case had oral arguments today. We don't know how that's going to come out. We'll probably be waiting until the May-June timeframe to hear the decision on that one.
So one of the things that I love having conversations about this, in 1943, there was a Supreme Court case, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. And we understand that Supreme Court cases, again, because of that certified question, are very narrow in scope. And just to explain this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I got a message, what is a certified question? So obviously, if you are appealing a conviction or a ruling from a court, you believe that the court erred in how they ruled. So what you want to do is to take the reason why the court erred, put it in the form of a question, and then submit that as a certified question. It's a very, very oversimplified explanation of what a certified question is. But ultimately, that entire Supreme Court case is wrapped around that certified question. The 1943 Supreme Court case versus Murdoch versus Pennsylvania ruled that a licensing tax on religious solicitations was unconstitutional. So he was going door to door. He was passing out the Watchtower magazine. He was soliciting monetary donations and was arrested because the city required all solicitors to purchase a license to sell goods in that particular borough. So the Supreme Court ruled that, first and foremost, a state cannot impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the Constitution. Now, in the form of that specific certified question, it addressed free speech, freedom of press, and freedom of religion, all First Amendment issues. So it did not stray into the Second Amendment territory. But here's the thing. If a state or a political subdivision of a state cannot impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the Constitution, and it relates to freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, well then, why would the state arguably be able to impose a licensing and fee scheme for the enjoyment of any other? You know what? You don't have the right to to freedom from unreasonable search and seizure unless you buy a freedom from search and seizure license, and only then will you have certain rights granted to you. That would never happen. So why is it that people think that they can take creative license with licensing and fee scheming Second Amendment issues?
Further, right to vote. You're going to have to pay your poll tax of $10. That doesn't work. So yes, the Second Amendment is the one amendment where they're willing to go put in place these additional fees. And we're now at, I believe, 29 states that have some form of constitutional carry, meaning you don't need to beg permission from the government to exercise this right. Remember, at the beginning of the show, we talked about the fact that the state has no duty to protect. And if they have no duty to protect, that is left up to the individuals themselves or any hired guards to make sure that your family gets home for dinner.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think all of these laws should be struck down, and I think the ATF should be disbanded. Maybe that's one organization that DOJ should go after. Get rid of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. By the way, call them BATFE because they really, really get pissed off when they're not referred to as a three-letter agency. They really want to be that three-letter agency. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, throw some bacon in there, and that sounds like a pretty damn good Sunday up here in the Granite State. We got about a minute and a half left here, JR. If you want to let people know how they can find out more about you and also about New Hampshire Firearms Coalition.
So for those who are not aware, right, New Hampshire has several different gun groups. You mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Women's Defense League. That is a group dedicated to helping women learn to shoot and both training and then protecting their rights. The largest state gun group right now is the New Hampshire Firearms Coalition, nhfirearms.org if you want to find out more. We do free email alerts that will let you know what's going on at the State House.
All right, JR, I want to thank you so much for jumping on the program, spending some time with us. We're going to keep our finger on the pulse of these issues, and as there are Second Amendment issue developments here in New Hampshire, or on the national level as far as preemption goes, and also the case involving the New Hampshire residents down there in Massachusetts, we will definitely get you back on to talk about those.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, my friend. Have a great night. guest co-host as well, too. We're also going to be chatting with Jeff Chidester. Jeff is the morning show host over there at, I think it's 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. We're going to be talking about the New Hampshire Journal article, Jeanne Shaheen, Scott Brown, Christopher T. Sununu. Who is it going to be? Your calls and much, much more coming up right after this. Don't go away.
Jason, let's go see your room.
That's not right. How is it? Is it good?
Whoa, what happened to our bump music? It's great to have you back. So got some good comments. Filling in for Therese last week, who is on week number 2 now of a pretty nasty head cold that I think a lot of people have gotten, unfortunately. So
my wife just caught something earlier today. She had to leave work early. I'm like,
for 10 years, 10 and a half years. So, man, you are just like, you got 2 Dunkin' beverages right there.
yeah, I got one for hydration, this refresher,
Okay,
and
then
I
you've got the
one for caffeine.
You've got the caffeine. I like that. I
There's
like
never
that.
too much caffeine.
I just getting nailed with this thing. I know, like I said, it took me 3 weeks to get over it, and I'm happy I did finally. But man,
this year it
kicked my
finally
butt.
got me. I normally don't get sick, but it finally got me this year, and I was I want to say about 3-4 days. I was around 104-degree fever, like body aches, my arthritis flared up. I basically couldn't even walk. But my wife is a daycare director, so like.
Oh, so you're like front line for everything that's coming out. Every head cold and flu and.
Every time something happens, it's like, babe, they brought something new into the daycare, and I'm like, I wish. You know what? Like, I'm not going to say where she works, but parents who dose their kids up on Tylenol and send them into school so that they crash halfway through the day, shame on you.
Well, and they all do the same thing, too, which is, all right, use a tissue, and it's, they just do this, and it's like they run around looking like little glazed donuts, because just the nose is running, and,
I swear, I'm like...
Get these kids out in fresh air.
I'll drop her off like a iced coffee and some flowers every now and then. I walk in there. Good lesson from my dad. Always iced coffees, chocolates, flowers if you have the opportunity. You're building yourself up a credit score for when you eventually screw up. But I would drop something off for my wife, and I'd walk in, and the little kids be like, "Hi, Mr. Julian." I'd be like, "No, holy water."
Okay, so I'm as you know, I'm newly married. So what were those again? Flowers,
iced coffees, and chocolate. Anytime you're out.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm just building up a credit score.
Okay, so that's the I'm not sleeping on the couch tonight.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to if you do that, especially when it's in front of her coworkers, because that has the like, oh my God, your husband is so great. I'm like, yeah, you're damn right I am.
I can see it now. Thank you, Julian. I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, so you ready to piss some people off?
Oh, yes, I am.
All right. So New Hampshire Journal article dropped 2 nights ago, written by Michael Graham. Exclusive poll, age issues dog Shaheen trailing Christopher T. Sununu, His Royal Majesty, by 9 points. A solid majority of New Hampshire voters, including almost half of Democrats, say they are concerned about Senator Jeanne Shaheen's age. It's funny they didn't express that about Joe Biden, but I digress. As she considers running for a 4th term in office, and if she ran against former Governor Chris Sununu, she would lose in a landslide. Wow. In a landslide. Those are the findings of the latest New Hampshire Journal / how the hell do you pronounce that? Praecones?
I
Praecones,
don't know.
Praecones, Praecones Analytical Poll released on Monday. Survey of 626 New Hampshire registered voters found them split largely down party lines on President Donald Trump's job performance. And by the way, his efficiency is cutting government spending. Shaheen turned 78 last month. I got to be honest. I mean, she doesn't actually look, at least from the New Hampshire Journal article, and I don't know how old that is. She does not look as bad as I think a lot of people could look at 78. I mean, she looks relatively youthful. She does not look like beef jerky, wrinkled and brown
and all gray. I mean, she takes. When you're that wealthy, you can afford to take care of yourself, and I'm sure she's not out getting her hands dirty doing anything. Well, I mean, there's plenty of cesspool in Washington, but she's not out, changing the oil in cars or, pouring concrete or building houses or anything like a lot of our Granite Staters are. But it to be completely honest, so I wrote an article on this, and I'm an equal opportunity critic of old people in Congress. I think the average age in Congress is in the 70s, like in both houses. I'm sorry, if you're over 75 years old, go home. Go home. You're not in connection. You're not up on technology. You're not up on the current economic issues of the time. You're not up on. You have no idea what the current job market looks like. You're still reminiscing about the good old days. The good old days are long gone. The rest of the Golden Girls are dead. Go out to pasture with them. Go retire to Florida with all the other old people.
But I think that's you know what, I've spent a lifetime in politics. Now I'm qualified. I know how the game is played. That's not said directly, but I've heard a number of senators who have implied that in order to get to that point, that you have to have paid your political dues. We're going to talk more about the political dues things, which I don't approve of and I don't agree with, one man's opinion. But that seems to be the mentality, Julian, that, I've paid my dues. I know how Washington works. I've been a senator. I've been a congresswoman or a congressman. Maybe I've been governor. I've held 5 or 6 different, political positions, elected official positions. And so now I'm qualified to be a senator.
What I hear when I hear that is I've climbed the ladder. Because if you're talking about the processes of how procedure works on the House floor, if you're talking about how the government works, if you're talking about how things actually play out in D.C., I'll give you 1 term. By the end of your first term, you should know how all that works. Otherwise, you don't deserve to be there for a second term. And to be honest, you should be able to figure it out pretty quickly within your first term. It shouldn't take you 9 terms to be like, I think I got a handle on this now. And now it's time to run for my next office so that I can play the same game there. My issue is 1 term, you should know how things work. After that, you're telling me you're just paying your dues, which you shouldn't have to pay your dues to represent the people that elected you. You're either doing your job or you're not. Now, most of the things that are stopped, the establishment in both parties, if you notice anything specific about them, they're all really old. They're all from that bygone year. And they've been in Congress for 20, 30, 40, 50 years in Joe Biden's case.
It's funny you say that because I was just thinking about that. I'm 51. Joe Biden has been in Washington as long as I've been alive.
I will never forgive the Democrats for this. Now, granted, I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. I don't even vote for wishy-washy neocon Republicans. I am a lifelong Frederick Douglass radical Republican from a family of old school Frederick Douglass radical Republicans since the birth of the Republican Party and the end of slavery. That said, how do you elect a guy who has 50 years of failure on every major policy decision, foreign and domestic, in the country? He hasn't been, by law of statistics, he should have got 1 thing right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy hell. But my problem is when I look at Jeanne Shaheen, I'm looking at somebody who does just enough. She keeps her mouth closed most of the time in order to just skate under the radar. And people are familiar with the name. Other elderly people are familiar with the name and go, oh, it's the person I know. The evil I know is better than the evil I don't know.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, we have a 2-month general election cycle. So we spend, 18 months beating the crap out of each other, and then you have to shift your messaging and your strategy for 2 months and hope that you're going to win, while for 18 months we basically did nonstop opposition research on each other. We are attacking each other left and right. It's impossible to unseat these people. The power of incumbency in this state is damn near finite. Not to mention the issue with college voters being able, out-of-state college tuition payers being able to vote in our elections, which, I'm sorry, you're not a resident here. You're not a Granite Stater. Vote in the state you came from.
Yeah,
if you can graduate with a degree, and you can take your SATs, and you can do all that paperwork for your college applications and all the stuff required to get accepted, well, guess what? It shouldn't be that hard to fill out a ballot in your home state.
Here's an easy way to figure this out. Do you pay in-state rates or do you pay out-of-state rates? If you pay out-of-state, where do you go during Christmas break? I go home. Where is home? New Jersey. Then you're not a New Hampshire resident.
Agreed.
Go back to the Garden State. Don't bring your firearm because they'll arrest you. But go back. Well, maybe that's better. Go back to the Garden State and vote there. But don't vote in our elections. Shaheen, 78 years old. How old is Chrissy?
Chris
Sununu, yeah.
What was he, 50, 54, 56?
Okay, and Scott Brown?
Scott Brown, I think, is late. I think he's mid-60s. Oh no, hold up. I'm
Okay.
gonna
Well, while
be
you look
absolutely
that
sure
up, I just want to read from the New Hampshire Journal article. Greg Moore, regional director of Americans for Prosperity, quote: Senator Shaheen appears to be suffering from the halo effect of Joe Biden's decline. Voters are clearly concerned about the age and fitness of older politicians. Whether Republicans can capitalize on that remains to be seen. I don't think Republicans could capitalize on a winning scratch ticket. Got to be honest.
So, Sununu is 50 years old and Scott Brown is 65.
Is he really that old? Wow. Okay. In a theoretical head-to-head match, Shaheen currently holds a solid 55 to 45% lead over likely GOP candidate Scott Brown. If conservative Commissioner of Education Frank Edelblut chose to challenge her, she's got a 59 to 41% lead. But drum roll, please. If four-term Governor Christopher T. Sununu chose to challenge her, the new poll shows he would handily defeat her 54 to 46%. Among unaffiliated voters, he leads 52 to 48. Now, of course, the general rumor out there is that Valerie Sununu, the wife, she doesn't want to go to Washington, and she doesn't want this, and she doesn't want that. I find it very hard to believe that Valerie Sununu wants a quiet life in Newfields with a picket fence and a Volvo and the 2.3 kids and a quiet existence. I firmly believe that if she were offered the trappings of a respectably elected position, or her husband were in Washington, D.C., she would gladly go with that. I don't think for a second that Sununu is not eyeing some type of political run here. We've known that he's had vice presidential aspirations. That's why he was carting Nikki Haley all over the state. But that being said, I would not be surprised as we get closer to this, we start to see at least some toying with the concept, especially if preliminary polling is showing a significant advantage over an incumbent, especially given the fact that for whatever reason, at least going back, who was it most recently? We had
Maggie Hassan.
Well, no. I'm talking about for Republicans. So you had Frank Ginta.
Yep.
And you had Kelly Ayotte, who screwed that opportunity up.
I honestly, so for everything that I hear around the state is that Sununu isn't running. And that New Hampshire Journal basically did this because they want to prod him into the race by showing him that, hey, not only do you have a path, you have a pretty clear, it's a walk for you. I mean, let's be honest. The two names in New Hampshire that are damn near finite and royalty are Shaheen and Sununu.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like either one of them. To be honest, Jeanne Shaheen could retire and endorse one of her kids and let her kids take the mantle. And I think half the voters in the state would just see the name and go, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met multiple people on the campaign trail that when Sununu was running for re-election, he didn't really have to run for re-election, but being on the ticket, people couldn't remember which Sununu we had for governor. But John Sununu, I was like, wait a minute, it's Chris Sununu. Quite a bit younger, not the same guy. Please don't vote if you don't know who the governor is. But,
well, yeah, it's amazing how many people just, are out there staggering around, find themselves in an election booth and just decide to start pulling levers or, now filling in the ovals, assuming that they can actually do that.
Well,
so I'm waiting for the smartphone app to come out to appeal to millennials and Gen Zers.
Yeah, the issue that we're going to have is I believe that Sununu may run. I don't know if he's going to run right now. I expect him to run in the future. I think it would be smarter for him to go for Maggie Hassan's seat in two more years.
All right. Well, we are going to take a very, very quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be joined on the video line by Jeff Chidester. He's the current host of Morning Update with Jeff Chidester. That can be heard mornings, the Morning Drive Show over there, 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. Much more of that, plus the phone lines, they work this week. Outstanding. We got the bugs worked out of that. 833-603-8255. That's 833-603-TALK. Much more coming up right after this. Don't go away.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
I'm Christine Ohm, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught, you will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Jason, let's go see your room.
No, that's not right. How is it? Is it good?
That sounds like show closer music. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We still have 2 more segments to go. I don't think we're going to go long tonight like we did last week, but people actually enjoyed that going. We stuck around for an extra 30 minutes. They got the bonus time there. People like that. So we may have to consider expanding the show out just a wee bit. I don't know.
Well,
don't forget.
stay up later.
Oh, they do stay up later. Absolutely. Except for me, I'm usually I like to be in bed by this time. To be honest, I'm getting old. So
No, me and my wife are addicted to SWAT, so we're binge watching episodes one after the other.
That's a good show. So, all right. So you can always catch the archive versions, GraniteGrock.com. You can check out the Granite Grok X channel and the Facebook feed as well. And then if you are on Facebook or Getter or CloudHub or X, you can do a search for Right America Media, and you can catch archived versions of Granite State Live right there. Also at RAM TV, Right America Media TV.live. So ramtv.live, and you can do a search for GSL, and that will pull the program up. All right, I want to welcome to the program right now the current host of the Morning Update with Jeff Chidester. You can hear that. That's Morning Drive Show. So I'm going to assume 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. probably on 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. He was also formerly the host of the popular New Hampshire Today Weekend Edition with Jeff Chidester, formerly known as the New Hampshire Perspective, before going over there and joining the crew over at 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. See, Jeff, what I'm doing there is I'm rehearsing for my guest host slot when I fill in for you. So welcome to the program. Great to have you.
Hey, great to be with you guys. Thanks.
So I wanted to get your perspective on this. We actually did reach out to Scott Brown, and I think he's actually going to be joining us next week. I think in studio. I think he's going to join us no matter what, but hopefully we get him in studio. If not, we'll get him in via the video link. But I wanted to get your perspective on this because this New Hampshire Journal article has people talking, and there's a lot of rumors swirling around that, again, I've heard it from a number of people that Sununu is not going to run. I got to be honest with you, Jeff, I don't buy it. I think Sununu has been setting himself up for a Washington seat where he can retire comfortably, ride out the next 20 years of his life, maybe longer, collect a nice big fat salary and a nice big fat pension, and, do what career politicians do, which is nothing.
Yeah, I think there's a few things at play. First is that when we look at, his wife does have some decision making in the process, but like you said, Keith, not as much as most people think. I think the other thing is the current poll, and we only have one poll, it's not enough right now for him. That point spread isn't nearly enough for him to feel comfortable again in the race. Then we have to get into the fact that he's being courted right now with good ticket item offers from both CNN and News Nation to either come in occasionally or to take over a show. They have lineup changes going on right now, and it appears to me that News Nation has made him a really good offer that he might possibly like that. It'll give him a chance not only to be down there and make some additional money, but they won't stop him from looking at some of the other boards that he may want to be on that will bring him extra money as well. So I think it's an interesting dynamic he finds himself in, that he could go media or he could go politics. It just depends on what appetite he has in a few months.
Well, I guess one of the questions would be, let's dollar cost average. What people, you see people that go in, of course, whatever the salary is, $175,000, $200,000 a year, whatever. They come out of a career in Washington, D.C. worth millions of dollars in a way that there is no possible. Even if they saved every penny of their congressional salary or their Senate salary, there is no way that they could amass the fortunes that they come out of. So obviously, there's some special interest cash sloshing around in D.C. Is he going to make more money by sitting there behind a network logoed coffee mug on a glass table at CNN, or is he going to make more money being a mover and a shaker and a policymaker up there on Capitol Hill?
Well, we all know where the money is. It's Washington, D.C. In elected office, and so for some bureaucrats as well. I'm with you. You can in a short term, if he goes for Senate, 6 years, he could easily walk out of there. He's gotten money already, and certainly there is family wealth, but he could easily walk out of there like we saw with some of the other people we've sent down there, $2 million to $3 million in one term. Mm-hmm. And it comes from, you point out, the rules are really too relaxed as to how they can make money. If it's not the book deal, they are allowed to take speaking engagements if they're done a certain way. And they all know the rules. I think during the freshman orientation class, they actually close the doors and turn the cameras off and teach them those other rules that we never hear. So I think there is that probability. I'm not sure what he's being proposed. I know News Nation has offered him quite a substantial amount of money and still allow him to go ahead and look at other avenues to raise money himself.
One of the things that people have asked, and clearly this article, it tells us what we already know, of course, that he's a four-term governor. And one of the things that I've heard, we consistently fail to elect federal representatives and even going back to 2018, when the heavily forecasted, I'm going to pat myself on the back for that one, the heavily forecasted shellacking that took place because under the failed leadership of Wayne McDonald, the New Hampshire Republican Party just got absolutely trounced. Sununu maintained his position. And one of the things, and I'm looking at this here, and I think this actually validates my viewpoint, Jeff. If Conservative Commissioner of Education Frank Edelblue chose to challenge her, she's got a 59 to 41% lead. So the most conservative is the person that loses most handily to Jeanne Shaheen. Scott Brown, is he a conservative? I mean, he's conservative in some capacities, and I think he's squishy on other ones. 55 to 45%. That's what Shaheen has. She has a significant lead over him as well. But when we look at Chris Sununu, according to New Hampshire Journal, it's a landslide. And the reason that I think that Sununu has maintained his position is because he is a safe bet for Democrats. He's not one of these radical, pink-haired, I shouldn't say transgender in sports because he supported the transgender bathroom bill. But he's not a radical. So the Democrats that are more common sense Democrats, the blue dog Democrats, and the people who are Democrats because their father and their fathers before them were Democrats, and so it's more of a tribal affiliation than it is anything else. These are the people who look at Sununu and go, he's a safe bet. Whether I'm a Democrat who's mainstream, I can vote for Sununu and know that he's going to be squishy in my favor on the issues that I support. And if I'm a conservative, there's a lot of things that he's going to do that I'm not necessarily going to like. But, if I'm a wishy-washy Republican, well, there's going to be a lot of things that he's going to do as well. So that bipartisan support is what gives him that lead. And it's the wishy-washy, squishy effect and the appeal to moderate Democrats that now creates the biggest chasm between Shaheen and Frank Edelblue.
Well, don't forget that, politics, big elections, the further you get away from the actual voters, the more it's about marketability and the more it's about your marketing campaign, because that's what campaigns really are. And when it comes to Sununu is a brand. And the average person, unlike me, you, Jeff, who doesn't spend every day, hour and hour, paying attention to politics, well, they look at, Sununu did this, and he did that, and he did this, and it's like, no. He actually fought the state legislature on that. He actually fought the Senate on that. He actually chastised the House of Representatives in the state over this bill and this bill and this bill. He actually gutted that. He actually kept our late primary and stopped the redistricting. And there's a lot more minutia that the average voter doesn't hear about. They just see the stuff that gets done, and they go, governor that was in charge when it happened, he gets the credit for it. And so he gets a lot of credit where if the average voter were to actually look at what he did, there are a lot of Democrats who wouldn't support him if they were actually looked at what he passes. And there's a lot of Republicans that if they actually read through the things that he tries to block and stop, wouldn't support him. But it's all about the marketing, and his marketing is on point.
Jeff, where do you see the... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I think, marketing is a big play in here. And people look at him as a traditional New Hampshire independent. And however you want to define independent, and I don't mean it as a political brand, they look at him as not always going along with everybody else, where you get that sense sometimes that that's how they look at particular people in a party. But, he's come out and he's, like you said, he's chastised the Democrats and he's chastised Republicans. And typically, New Hampshireites kind of like that. They'll say, look, I probably don't agree with everything he speaks about. But generally speaking, when he has the choice to make, he makes it the same way I do. Thinks about it, sees what's best. Maybe I don't see everything that's out there as far as the facts. And then he makes his decision. He has branded himself very well in that regard.
Yes, he has.
Do you think he's making his decisions based upon what I would imagine that he would be based upon it's the cost-benefit analysis. Where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 20 years? What am I facing right now? And which decision is going to help lead me or catapult me to where I want to be in 10 and 20 years?
To be honest,
Oh,
I'm just going to throw out there, I think going into media makes him a solid national voice if he wants to run for president. I mean, senators come and go. New Hampshire is not a big state that allows everybody to get an idea. I mean, half the people all over the country don't know that New Hampshire is a state. When you go outside of New England and you say you're from New Hampshire, I have to tell people I'm a suburb of Boston. Like they think of New England as a collective, and we all worship. All they know about New England is Tom Brady, Boston Celtics, and the Red Sox when they have a good season.
Yeah.
So I mean that outside of here, nobody knows who Sununu is except for the occasional appearance on CNN. So national media on News Nation, where he gets to get up there and pontificate with Chris Como or CNN, he gets to be a national voice. He gets to have that ability to come across reasonable, whether he agrees with the average voter in the country or not. He gets to market himself to the whole country, and he gets paid for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that's the case, and if that's the ticket to success, might I suggest, I mean, if being in front of the national media and media in general is the way to catapult yourself to a national seat, might I suggest the Carolyn Levitt Jeff Chidester ticket for 2028. There we go. I'm going to throw it out there. You can be Carolyn Levitt. I mean, hey, listen, you want to have the first female president? There you go, right there. What a spitfire. I think she'd do a fantastic job. She's learning a lot from watching President Trump in office. And if that's the key, then I look at it and I say I would not want to see Sununu in that position, but I have to agree that it's the independent spirit that makes him very attractive to people. I'm not going to go with the Democrats. I'm not going to go with the Republicans. I'm going to be my own person. And that's a double-edged sword. I'm going to be my own person, and I'm going to do what I think is right. And sometimes the Democrats will like me, and other times the Republicans will like me. But I've come to terms with the fact that I can't be everything to all people all the time. Let the chips fall where they may. And, maybe that's the secret to his success right there.
Well, it is absolutely the secret to his success, especially, he'll be running in a statewide election if he does run for Senate. He knows how to win that. It's actually a more, it's not an easy path, but it's easier for him than it might be for other candidates. Anyone who runs in the 2nd Congressional always has a tough time if they're a Republican because it is such an odd district. And I don't mean by people, but I mean by the construct of the electorate. You hit Concord, you get lost. You hit Nashua, you get lost if you're in the GOP. Up north, you do very well, but that's not a populous base. And so it's really difficult. But statewide, you get that opportunity to peel a few people away from Nashua, peel a few people away from Concord, and then benefit very well from that 1st Congressional that can benefit a GOP person with the right kind of mindset.
I'm glad you brought up Congressional District 2 because during the next segment here, we've got about 2.5 minutes before we get into a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the winnability of CD1 and CD2 because that's been a topic that has been on people's minds ever since I've been here. We did see Frank Ginta. In Congress, we saw Kelly Ayotte, albeit a very, very short political career in the Senate. But when you look at the Senate seats, when you look at CD1, CD2, they have been solidly blue. There's every once in a while, there's this anomaly where a Republican manages to get in. But it's and I think a lot of times, especially with NHGOP, they've looked at CD2 and they've pretty much written CD2 off. And not only with Willie Tang Williams, not only with Bob Burns, but going back to the 2 campaigns that were run by Steve Negrin. I just remember when Steve Negrin was debating Ann Custer, where were the representatives of the NHGOP? They weren't at WMUR. They were at a fundraiser for Eddie Edwards. So
I think there's a solid reason for that, and I think it goes back to an ignoring of basic marketing principles. And when we get into the next segment, I want to run the 5 reasons why I think every candidate in both CD1 and CD2 manages to lose off you, Jeff, and see where you land on that, because I think we have the same problem in both districts, and I think it has to do with a failed methodology of running campaigns.
All right, so we're going to get into that when we come back. Also, I did mention that we do have the phone lines. Those are up and running, and they are working. So I'm curious to see, who would you vote for? If right now, even if you would vote for Shaheen, that's okay. I would love to know who you would vote for. Would it be Jeanne Shaheen? Would it be Frank Edelblue? Would it be Scott Brown? Or would it be His Royal Highness Christopher T. Sununu? 833-603-8255. That's 603-8255. I'm sorry, 833. I was confused those because area code, right? 603. 833-603-TALK. Much more of Granite State Live coming up with myself, Julian Acciard, and Chef Chidester when we come back. Don't go away.
History is made. The joint address to Congress, live. President Trump delivers the vision for America's future, from a booming economy to bold foreign policy to securing our borders. What's next for the nation? It's a moment of truth. How will America rise in 2025? You won't want to miss this. Join us for a night that will define our future. It's more than just words. It's action. President Donald J. Trump. Tonight.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
I'm Christine Ohm, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught. You will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
Jason, let's go see your room.
No, that's not right. How is it? Is it good?
Ooh. So, I gotta be honest, when I came into the studio today, I was greeted with that song. I'm a huge Bill Withers fan. And so I was talking with our producer, and I said, Bill Withers. I said, that's a very underrated artist. And he said, I've never really listened to him. And I said, spend some time with the Bill Withers anthology, and I think you're going to really like what you hear. So that was actually really good. I really appreciated Lovely Day by Bill Withers. All right, joining us on the Zoom line is the current host of the Morning Update program with Jeff Chidester. That's the Morning Drive Show over on 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. Mr. Jeff Chidester, again, welcome back, and thanks for jumping on this Tuesday evening.
Oh, it's been fun, and plus you played a little bit of yacht rock for me, so I mean that's awesome.
Yes. What is your favorite yacht rock song?
Oh, it's right. Well, almost every one of them have Michael McDonald in it, so you're pretty much doomed at that point. So it's What a Fool Believes. It's right there. That way, because so many came out of that too.
So I'm gonna ruin a song for you. I played this for a good friend of mine. There's a video that Rick Moranis did from SCTV. Mm-hmm. So if you go on and you look up Rick Moranis, SCTV, and it's Ride Like the Wind by Christopher Cross. And so Rick Moranis is playing Michael McDonald in that clip. Watch that clip, and then forever and ever and ever, amen, when you hear Ride Like the Wind by Christopher Cross, you will see Rick Moranis as... It's a great song. This was actually my first LP as a kid, believe it or not.
Wow.
See, what's going to happen now, though, is that you're going to get nailed if you try to post this up on YouTube, because they're going to take it down for a copyright violation. Even though, you pay all the fees and everything else like that. All right, so let's get back into this here. Jeanne Shaheen, do you think she's done, or do you think she's going to, run for another term? What are your thoughts here? I mean, obviously, you've got your finger on the political pulse here in the Granite State. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think right now she's getting a lot of pressure both nationally and locally to keep running, and to the point where there's a few things they hope might happen. Maybe they get the governor's office back at the same time, and eventually put someone else in there in a couple of years after she's reelected. Part of the problem is that her daughter, Stephanie, right? There was a track that she was supposed to follow, so she would be ready for the Senate seat. The first track was she was supposed to win the mayor's office in Portsmouth, and when she came in third in a very name-driven election, a lot of people started getting worried, and they said, well, we don't even think you're ready to run for Congress, because that was the next place she was going to run. And then, of course, Pappas came in a little bit outside where most people thought he was ready to be, and ran, and that kind of stifled Stephanie a little bit more. And now Stephanie's been kind of floating around without any real political direction. But there is that possibility that they're still going to try to get her in the seat they originally were hoping for 10 years ago when they started her on this path. That's a big picture possibility. I think the other thing is, too, is that, we've all seen the interviews lately with Senator Shaheen. We've seen her. She's been a little bit more rough than she's been in the past. She usually has been somebody that's been a little bit more diplomatic in the way she said things. She seems like that grandmother on the beach who doesn't care if anyone hears her fart. And she's just that mean right now. It's really very, and I think that's one thing that, kind of tells me that that's more of an indicator that she probably doesn't want to run. And if you force her, she's not going to worry about whether she wins or loses if you force her to run.
The one thing, and even a broken clock can be right twice a day. So I have to give credit where credit is due. And the one thing I would say about Senator Shaheen is that she has kept, and I think Julian said this earlier, a very low profile. She has not had, I don't know if we want to call them scandals, but there's two things that come to mind. One of Maggie Hassan's staffers yelling F you to Trump in the rotunda of the Capitol building, and then another one of her staffers was fired and then criminally charged for accessing databases that he did not have justification or rights to access. You haven't seen, and again, it's not a scandal of Maggie Hassan, but it's a scandal involving staffers. So that calls into question your ability to choose your staff and choose your staff appropriately and wisely. Right. We haven't really seen anything like that coming out of the Shaheen camp. So, she's not in the news for all the wrong reasons. And again, if you're even a moderate Democrat, there are a lot of things that she sides with that you would probably side with. it seems like it would make sense that she would probably stay in there as long as she could stay in there. I mean, keep running until you get defeated.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one point. I think, and you bring up a really good point, Keith, that has always amazed me about at least the class of people we've sent down to Washington, D.C. the last 20 years. If you actually do nothing, you're going to get reelected. And what I mean is not only do you not cause scandals, but not running to the camera like we see too many of the politicians do, not really overly involve yourself in the more contested, certainly the more contested elements of the debates that are going on, especially on the social issues. If your name's nowhere near that heated battle, people assume that you weren't part of that battle. They have to look at the voting roll, and none of them are going to ever do that. And look at Andy Custer. Please name one accomplishment, one major bill that she championed through the Congress and got it through, and that made a difference not only for New Hampshireites but Americans. One.
The only thing that I'm going to try to take that challenge as the conservative in the room. I'm going to, as the staunch conservative in the room. I remember when I was on NTK and UVR, she came on my show. I was shocked. I got a call from her staffer, and Andy Custer wants to come on the show, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, did the sun rise in the west? What the hell just happened? And it was because she wanted to talk about preservation of I think World War II memorial statues or something like that. So it was, this is all you're allowed to talk about. Don't stray off this. And so I played along with it, thinking, all right, if I stick to not the script, but if I stick to the the plan here, maybe she would come on and have a candid conversation with me. No, that didn't happen. That was about it. I mean, I really can't think of anything else. So I guess you win the challenge. I can't think of anything.
Yeah, and I remember that piece of legislation. It was actually a very good piece of legislation that almost every congressperson has supported. I don't think anyone voted against it. So someone was going to come out with it as well. I mean, and I think that's the point that's frustrating. Julian, he's been through the campaigns before. I think the thing is that what does frustrate me is that's never been how New Hampshireites have looked at the representatives. If you look at Judd Gregg, even Charlie Bass to some degree, they've always had at least major legislation that they authored, they put through the rigors, they got it passed, they got it signed, that in some way benefited us in New Hampshire, but also benefited the country. And that's the kind of champions we don't see anymore. We just don't see them anymore.
It's one of the things that it just grinds my gears, because we're not actually being represented. And we're not being obviously we don't have Republican representation there, but we don't have Pappas and Custer, or now Goodlander, or Jeanne Shaheen, or Maggie Hassan actually actively representing us. They're signing on to whatever they're told to sign on to, and they do just enough to stay safe in the district by not being overtly controversial. To be honest, I was surprised that Maggie Hassan went at some of the nominees of President Trump the way that they did, the cabinet nominees and the confirmations the way that she did. Now, obviously, we know how the WWE wrestling goes with these confirmations and the fundraising in D.C. so that she can, fill her coffers for her next run in 2 years from now. But what I think this is we're being failed. And where I think the GOP goes wrong with trying to elect people, and this is where what we were talking about in the break, is a failure of marketing. Mm-hmm. One, we don't spend enough time. We spend a lot of time attacking Jeanne Shaheen, Chris Pappas, Maggie Hassan, and now Maggie Goodlander. And we don't spend enough time talking about what we would do to solve the problem. We identify the problem a lot, but we don't offer solutions. Mm. And I liken it to Ford versus Chevy. Ford does not run ads about how much Chevy sucks. They run ads about how no matter what lifestyle you live, we got a Ford for you. If you're a purple hair, hairy armpit girl in Berkeley, California, we got a Ford Fiesta for you.
Or a Subaru.
Or Subaru. And if you're a truck guy, you're a rancher, we got a King Ranch for you.
Yeah.
If you're a soccer mom, we got a Ford Transit or whatever their new minivan is. But they market their solution, and we don't do that. We also don't proactively
But we get sidetracked though, on
market
that.
candidates.
We get sidetracked that bad. And you know what's interesting is that this election cycle here in New Hampshire was the first time that we really didn't fall prey to that, and that was on the abortion issue.
Yes.
We did not. The Republican Party was not chasing after the accusations of the Democrats. They were coming out and they were making solid, assertive statements that stood by themselves. And that derailed the Democrats.
And that's what we need to do, because remember, we're always reactive. Democrats, being progressives, are always progressing towards a goal. We are your conservative. The average conservative wants to get to a point where we can disengage, kick up our feet, and drink a beer and watch the game. We need to be proactive in protecting our liberty, in protecting our rights, in protecting the
Julian,
country and the legacy.
You make a really great point, and I think it's a great first point because once again, if you look back, and I know many people don't like us hearkening back to Ronald Reagan, but once again, attack the policy, not the person. Attack the policy, not the person. And people see that because then what do they get? They're not worried about the name. They're not worried about the person. They're hearing, okay, there's something about this policy is concerning, and I'm not hearing any names other than what is in the policy. And I think that we've lost the track. I think what the Republicans managed to do last fall, especially the House members with their 10-part plan, and they were going door to door with that 10-part plan, they weren't attacking anyone. They weren't using names. They weren't barely even using the Democrat Party. They go, what on this list do you think works for you? And let's look at this policy. And I think, Julian, you're right. That's the marketing that people have to lead with a little bit more in both parties. And I think the Democrats actually have lost that high ground.
I'm going to piss some people off right now. I'm also going to say this. This is New Hampshire. We are the freest state in the country by far, but we are not a MAGA state. All right? You cannot run an entire campaign on who can be the most MAGA. That doesn't mean you can't be MAGA. It doesn't mean you can't be America first. I'm both. But what I will say is that cannot be your whole personality. You, as an individual, have to have a value-added proposition. You have to have a value proposition, which means this is me. I am MAGA, hyphenate, but I stand for this, and this. This is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I believe in. And this is retail politics in New Hampshire. You cannot spend all your time at every single GOP event and just, getting around the in crowd. You have to knock doors, less on the waving signs, less on the convoys and flag parades that make us all feel good in the signs, and more time actually knocking doors. And for God's sakes, do not spend $200,000 on little, 24-inch yard signs that look like white noise on the side of the road. Use big, huge 4x8s because those are billboards, and use them at intersections so that they stick in the mind. So when people go to bed at night, they go, God, that Chris Bright guy. Which is the campaign I just came off of. So, shameless plug.
Okay. We do have the State of the Union, I think, that starts at 9 o'clock. But because we are not network, we could actually go a little bit longer. Jeff, you want to stick around for maybe 5 or 10 minutes? You have the ability to do that? Okay. Because I wanted Julian to finish up on those 5 points. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is, I've heard some rumblings about this, so I wanted to get your take on this. Chris Pappas, governor. What are your thoughts?
God, I hope not.
Do you think he's setting up for a gubernatorial run?
Well, and then it gets into a whole new realm. Can he win a statewide election? And I think, once again, it goes back to Julian. We know that everybody running for office should be known right now. They've got to come out pretty soon because you need to be running now. And the thing is that, Julian talked about, the marketing approach. If you're running for the federal offices, before you make your announcement, make sure that you've gone on radio shows. Make sure you've gone on shows like this. Make sure you've written things into the editorials about your policy positions, not attacking a person, but pointing to a policy so that you have a foundation to run on when you get up there and make your announcement. But with Chris Pappas in particular, I think he's one of the more vulnerable candidates. I think the first congressional is completely winnable in the right way. And I think that if you run for governor, what we have to do is look at some of the key policies that he has defended. And it's typically we're not good on the social issues in the GOP. But what I will tell you is that transgenderism is not a winning issue. And it's particularly not a winning issue here in New Hampshire. And he's already started to notice that's going to be a problem for him, but he has a past legacy of already supporting it. And I think that's one of the issues that they certainly can play on. It would be interesting to see if he could. He will not go up against Ayotte, though.
No. Well, one of the issues that we're also going to have is we spend, like we're discussing, we have a late primary. You cannot spend 18 months attacking each other and then in 2 months turn around. And there's some level of psychological programming that takes place when you're doing anywhere from 5 to 8 events a day, constant speeches about what you stand for. You have your 2-minute stump speech, and you have your typical talking points. You're programming your mind to respond to certain cues, and you eventually no longer become a free thinker when you get asked questions. And when the general election comes around, you're not able to problem solve and respond to voters in debates and so on and so forth in a way that you can come across to the average voter as a reasonable person. This is one of the issues why I have major issues with consultants on both sides of the aisle, is they spend more time attacking each other than they do addressing voters, and they don't live in the real world, especially the people in the DC Beltway. And in New Hampshire, let's be honest, the premier constitutional scholar in the state right now who can rattle off every iteration of the New Hampshire Constitution is not a Supreme Court justice. It's a dog trainer.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Richard, just for those of you who aren't keeping score at home, Daniel Richard. We're getting Ride Like the Wind. Is that... Oh, okay. So I guess we're... he's playing the video. Play the video, Juan, real quick. This is going to ruin this song for you forever.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
I believe that's Lisa Murkowski coming up on the screen.
Is that, it looks like, is that Senator Smith in front of her?
Yes,
Tina
Tina Smith and
which, by the way,
was with,
it's interesting. So there's an article on the Gateway Pundit here. Headline: Democrats are out of ideas, so they plan on disrupting President Trump's historic speech to Congress with hand clappers and eggs. So it should be interesting to see what winds up happening here. They're planning on bringing eggs, flashing red cards, and disrupting President Trump's speech with hand clappers. So, yeah. That's the nice thing about Democrats, Jeff, is that especially when you're in talk media, it's like Christmas morning every day of the week because there's never a shortage of things to talk about.
Well, you're not wrong, Keith. And I think the other thing, too, that always bothers me about the next part of that story is the media themselves. Now, if the Republicans did that, immediately upon exiting that chamber, there would be cameras and microphones in all the Republicans' faces, even the ones who did nothing, saying, what do you think of this childish behavior? Why do you think that that was appropriate? Can you please explain why your party did that? But that's not what we'll get here. We'll get, we might have a few that will ask that question, but most of them, they will chuckle on CNN, they will chuckle on MSNBC, and they'll go, you can understand why they had to do this. I don't know if I can understand the fact that they bought the eggs, and I don't know what they're going to do with them. At the price of the eggs, they're going to charge those back to their district.
Yeah, they're not going to throw them. I guess it's just to show, to highlight how, the prices of eggs are going out of control. Your 4-egg omelet with cheese is going to be, it's a down payment on an Oldsmobile, or it's getting pretty damn close to it.
Isn't it amazing, guys, that now the Democrats have come to the understanding that the inflation is something they should be talking about? Now is the time they should be talking about the economy. I spent all last spring flipping through channels every time a Democratic commercial came on in New Hampshire, and I understand that a woman's right to choose is important to the Democratic Party, but that I need 5 ads in a row, and that's what they spent all their money on, and they're surprised they lost as bad as they did, except at the federal seats. But once again, this is just, the catalyst for when we look at what Julian was talking about, what Republicans have to think about. It's easy for me as a radio host to be sarcastic and to go after them. I have a microphone. Unless somebody comes into the booth and takes it away from me, I have that privilege. Politicians have to be a little bit better than me in the sense that, okay, if I speak like Jeff Chidester sometimes, I'll probably do really well in the primary. I won't do well in the general.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that when they start thinking about that marketing plan, and Julian, I saw you on an event once where you took questions before you did anything else. You didn't go into your stump speech. And there were really good questions. And I think sometimes you should do that early on in your campaign don't say anything. Let them ask questions, and then, as a great West Virginian politician once said, you learn more from the questions you got from the last event that you can use in the next event.
See,
and I think that's an important thing.
It's a winning formula.
That's actually one of the things I learned on the campaign trail, and one of the things my speech was not the same every time I gave it. It was not the same. It was tailored to the audience. The more people I knew in the audience, the less I talked about myself, and the more I took questions, because I hate talking about myself. I really do. When you have to start doing those stump speeches, I think you get trained, like I said before, into not actually catering to the actual voter, but rattling off a set of talking points. And I think one of the failures is going to consultants to let them tell you what you should say, rather than telling the consultants, I have a message I need to get out there, and how do we get this message out there the best possible? With my candidate this last cycle, the one thing I told him is, I'm going to tell you when you screw up. But far before I ever praise you and tell you how awesome you are, you're going to get everything that you've done wrong, because you need to learn and get better every single speech, every time you go out, every time you shake a hand. And one of the issues is we're far too reactionary to what the left does. We're not proactive. We talk way too much about the brand, not what we're going to do. Way too much about our opponents, not what we're going to do to fix it. Not enough ground game. And to be honest, you have to be positive. You have to be positive and highly marketable.
Yeah. I think at one point, especially when we look at the second congressional during this last cycle, paying too much attention to where Goodlander lived. I know it's an important issue to me, but once again, it's not an important issue to the voters. We spent so much time and so much capital fighting that issue when we should have been fighting the policies, although she was not as defined as certainly Chris Pappas was. That's why I thought the first congressional was a little bit more winnable. And I'll tell you right now, if Caroline had been just a little bit older, because I think that played a big factor in it, she probably would have gotten a little bit more attention from independents.
I completely agree. The average voter in the state is around 65 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but this isn't North Carolina. This isn't Virginia, this isn't a solid red state where you can elect a Madison Cawthorn. And unfortunately for Caroline, as much as it is a major issue to her, transgenders, like boys and girls sports, is not a general election issue in New Hampshire.
But I got to be honest with you, I think that maybe there would have been a better shot at Carolyn winning. There would have been a better shot at Don Bolduc winning, and there would have been a better shot at Bob Burns winning had the NHGOP actually put some resources into these people instead of wailing and gnashing their teeth and having an 8-year-old-esque temper tantrum that it wasn't their guy that won. And remember the words of Sununu. We have to stop electing unelectable candidates. If they were unelectable candidates, Chris, they wouldn't have won the primary. Maybe if you put some resources and actually backed them, the loyalty pledge that the NHGOP always asks people to sign and adhere to, well, that goes both ways.
We also got to remember how visceral these primaries get. Because we had a visceral primary with Andy Sanborn and Eddie Edwards. We had a visceral primary with Matt Mayberry,
that was personal, though.
Yep.
That was very personal.
And the one with Matt Mowers and Caroline Levitt got personal. Like, it took a turn for the worse real quick, and all of a sudden, we went from having, all right, everyone's being pretty respectable, to within 15 days, it's like, and there we go. Yep. There we go. All of a sudden, we're dumping out everyone's bad news, and we do the opposition research for the left, and by the time it's over, they just get to be like, hey, this is what your own guy says about you.
Hey, real quick, before we wrap up here, I'm just curious about one more thing, Jeff. Buckles the Clown, a.k.a. Ray Buckley. How soon before he is jettisoned out of the chairman's chair here in New Hampshire?
He holds on to it tight. And once again, the problem is that the way that the Democratic Party is structured in the state, he got really rich. And when you have money, you can go ahead and use that not only to certainly lead a good lifestyle, but also cushion the job that you feel comfortable in. You know, I go back to the day, one day I was on radio. I was on with Jack Keith a long time ago, and Ray and I were on the same radio show together. And at one point, you know, he's just a very vicious man. And I think, and he said, you know, why should I listen to you? We were talking about the heroin crisis. I said, why should I listen to you? You know, you're just a political hack. And I said that, I said, you know, I've looked at my paycheck, and I'm pretty sure I don't have any seal from any major party, but I can see your paycheck, and it's got Democrat on it. It's got every left-leaning organization on it. How much money do you make, Ray? How much money actually comes in where you promote those ideals within the party and you actually make money off of that promotion? I think if people started pointing out more of his vicious streak, and just go after the streak and maybe not go after the person initially, we could actually create a situation that the Democrats are fighting. And you know this too. There are a lot of Democrats who do not like him.
Oh, he does that to everybody.
No, I mean, he blocked me after accusing me of going down to Texas to make money and bring it back into state. When I went down there, we do an annual trip with the guys I served with for, you know, PTSD and stuff to make sure everyone's mental health is okay, so we stop losing guys to suicide. And I had just got back from a trip in Texas, and I met with Ben Carson and Alan West while I was down there, but I wasn't there for money. I went down there for a week to make sure my guys didn't kill themselves. And when he called me on taking a picture and posting online in Texas, I called him on the bullshit. No. I called him on his bull, and then he goes, yeah, that's not cool, and then blocked me because, you know, I care about the guys I served with.
I used to have guys come up to me, people who would come up to me up in the Upper Valley, and they would ask me, how many days has it been? And what they were referring to was, do you remember this, Jeff? I used to keep track, and I would announce it every day when we would, 6:05 on WNTK and WUVR's First Look, day 759, that Ray Buckley has not accepted the invitation to come on this program and have a respectful and intelligent conversation about sociopolitical issues. It became a joke, and I think I stopped counting at like 1,100 and something. Someday I'll tell you about the story that I went up and spoke to him at the DNC of all places. That was an interesting exchange with Ray. I do know that the joint address, or President Trump addressing the joint session of Congress, is going to be coming up here in just a moment. I know people want to catch that, so we're going to put a wrap on this Tuesday's edition of Granite State Live. Again, if you'd like to listen to more of Jeff, you can do that every morning. Are you 6 to 9 morning drive?
I'm 6 to 10.
6 to 10. Awesome. 4 hours of sociopolitical news, analysis, and commentary over there at 99.9 FM and 1370 AM WFEA. You can catch the morning update program with Jeff Chidester. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program. Love to have you back on anytime. And come on, we'll rattle some cages and we'll poke the bear.
Yeah, back at both of you guys. Come on the radio show. I mean, it's a lot of fun. We also do a roundtable once a month, and I'd like to get you guys on that roundtable.
All right. Sounds good. Love to take you up on that offer. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And that is going to do it for the Tuesday evening edition of Granite State Live. Again, you can always catch the archive program, granitegrok.com, on the X feed and Facebook feed as well, too. Right America Media, ramtv.live/GSL, and do a search for Right America Media on Facebook, Getter, Clout Hub, and X. We will be back next week live with a brand spanking new edition of Granite State Live. Until then, I want to thank my guest co-host today, Julian Acciard, and certainly we want to extend best wishes to Therese for a rapid recovery from that nasty head cold. God bless everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye.